Hello, hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. Basketball Rewind, of course. I'm joined by Beyond, Coach, the usual suspects, of course. That being said, welcome to the show. We're going to be talking this week about a couple different things. Not necessarily good, bad, the ugly, but we will be talking Raptors related things. But before we get into that, we're going to be talking about some league wide things that, made the news, for example. So, let's start with Tony Snell. Tony Snell, that sort of news kind of bubbled to the surface, and basically to get to his 10-year eligibility as a league veteran, he needed to get a contract by Friday. It is no longer Friday as of the filming of this. What's interesting about that is if you look into it, there's a lot of benefits for him making that mark. Things like pension, things like help for children's education, things like what's most important and what a lot of Canadians don't always understand is the cost of healthcare. For NBA players, as they age, or just as we age, they get older and then eventually they lose the ability to have their insurance paid for. You have to pay for healthcare insurance in the States, and that cost, depending on what you have, especially if you have, call them, sorry for the bad term, but comorbidities, it can go up. He has two kids that have some issues that need medical attention and will continue to need medical attention throughout their life. And so it's not just quite as simple as he made a lot of money during the course of his career, but it's also setting his kids up for when he's not around. So let's start the discussion with that.
uh, I mean, I find people are always so harsh when it comes to celebrity and sports athletes of like, well, they make the money, so therefore I can't relate to what they're dealing with, even though the situation that we're talking about is quite relatable for anybody. Um, so like, I think we're talking offline about, trips to, Dubai or the case may be, the wife or the case may be, that's the case. My thing is like, people have children that are not well and stuff like that and still actually go places afterwards. They don't get locked up in the house when it's happening. And my point is like, what's the big deal if you're the NBA? You're always claimed to be a big family. What was the big deal if I sign the guy? Now, if it's for 10 days or for one day, I've heard conflicting reports. Either way, I think if you're a team and he's playing, he's the fifth man on the roster, you can find ways around it. There's also, I sure, as I listened to NBA radio today, he met, Amin Al Hallison was talking. He says there's ways, all sorts of little tricks you could do to get him on the roster without having it affect your team. So, like, I mean, I always look at it as like, is it hurting anybody, right? When it's all said and done, who cares what the family's doing and stuff like that? Is it hurting somebody? And when it's all said and done, is the purpose in this case to help, in this case, two young children? And if that's the worst thing in the world in this case here, like, I don't understand why it's something that's so difficult, and it's really a bad look, I guess, across the board for the NBA. I mean, next year he'll have an opportunity again. Hopefully, someone signs him in the training camp and kind of lets him play for a couple of games or whatever, just to kind of make sure he has it locked in for 10 years. But it wasn't a good look. I understand. I think the teams Amin gave were, yeah, had the right teams: New Orleans, Sacramento, Chicago, and Minnesota. I would say three of those four teams might be a little dicier because I think New Orleans is in playoff position right now. They're in play-in position or playoff position. I can't remember off the top of my head with the West, but I think yeah. But the other two definitely in the West are in playoff position. Chicago, obviously play-in position. But the part that I think he made, which is a great point, because that's what I was thinking as well too. Chicago's where he played initially. He's a bull, and it's like, really, like, it's like, if you claim to be like Mr. Family and stuff like that as an organization and as a league, and one of the teams you play for couldn't even give you a little bit of a break, it doesn't look great. That's all I have to say. It doesn't look great. But
The
hey,
o-
man,
yeah,
hopefully
the
that.
other thing before Coach chimes in here, I think it's important to also outline that the players themselves actually contribute to these things through their own money. That's part of where the revenue split goes to. So at the end of the day, you're dipping into a pie that is really something that you're paying for. It's like,
You contributed to. Right.
If you have a job, you pay pension through your job at times. It's that kind of thing. It's you're paying into your own future retirement stuff.
And for folks in this case, to your point, what you mentioned just now is perfect. Like we see things happen in like quote regular life all the time, right? They extend someone just long enough so they can get their package, right? There's all sorts of different ways that it goes about in all sorts of industries, guys. Like this is not that new. Like this is not some crazy thing. Like it's some special thing because the athlete. No, if you go to Joe Blow at the widget company down the street in this case here, and so be it, if it's the company wants to move on, they'll extend you out for X amount of years or X amount of months to get into the magic number 65, and great, there you go. Or if it has to do in this case with a number of years so you can be in some type of pension of some sort, cool. If you're only about 2 months away, unions do it. There's ways to get around this, guys. It's not like this is not like something that's out in Neverland. So that's all I just want to say about that.
Coach, any thoughts before we switch into topic number two?
So I heard about this. I also heard what Charles Barkley had said. I believe that his two children they are autistic. I believe is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough situation certainly to be in. Like Beyond said, the NBA prides itself in being a close, connected family, and I can understand that if you are a part of any professional sports league, your player, your coach, your equipment manager, whatever you may be. It is a fairly small knit group, despite it comes with a ton of popularity, of course, notoriety. But, you know, the 25 teams that don't have roster spots, there's not a whole lot they can do. Now, as Beyond just said, there's 4 or 5 that probably do have a roster spot, and it would be nice if they could help this 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 Tony Snell out and particularly his family at this time. It's a really tough situation to be in, and the stress that must incur on them, it must be quite a bit right now. But from what I've read, that multiple teams would have signed him if it was a 10-day thing. There'd have been no issue. But I think it's a year-long thing that he has to be signed to, more or less has to be signed to the end of the season, is my understanding a little bit. So hopefully that this will get resolved. Like Beyond said, I think there are other ways in which they can help him out outside of just putting him on a roster. And I hope that this is able to take place, because this would be a really it would be not only a good story but good for Tony and his family at this time.
Absolutely. I think it would also be good because, he can represent that community himself because I believe he was also diagnosed with autism. Now, of course, it's a spectrum disease, so it presents in very many ways. Some less severe, some more severe. I'm not here to comment on his situation or his children's situation, but it would have been a good thing for him to kind of been successful in this case and be able to spotlight it a little bit more. Moving on to the topic number two. Of course, 65 game limit came up. Embiid, interestingly, is now injured. I want to say another thing is that attached to that is how NBA teams report on injuries also needs to improve, because the way that the Sixers team, or I guess, I don't know if it was specifically their team or Shams, but let's just say a combination of the two, reported on his injury in a way that most physicians or most people who are moderately medically aware and trained were like, if you're putting it like that, and I'm not going to put the tweet up, but the way that it was described, if it's described that way, you're not telling someone to get rest. You're telling someone to get surgery. So they've been called out by medical professionals who, like the NBA, who basically are saying, you need to be better at outlining what's going on here with players. Any thoughts on the 65 game limit or the other half
Oh
topic?
boy, where to start with this? So we spoke about this near the beginning of the season when this rule came about,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw this on both sides of this, how this could be problematic because it cuts both ways. I think we focus more on the other side of it as like, okay, if I want to save some money from a team, all of a sudden so and so's got sore knee that night. In this case here, it's like and then there's gonna be a lot of discussions going on about why he or she could he couldn't play. And that was one scenario that could play out. The other one is the one we're seeing right now, where concerns in this case here of making sure they actually qualify for certain things that they're forcing themselves to play. We said a week ago offline, we watched the game. First night back, Siakam's come to Indiana. They play Portland. And I remember telling you, and you were shocked when I said, no, reports say he and Halliburton will be playing. I mean, referring to he as Siakam. And you said to me at the time, you said, like, what? You were pretty much like shocked. He's like, no, you sure about that? I was like, absolutely. That's what they said. It said. I heard it multiple times at different sources. And I think you couldn't believe it. Well, you probably in this case here, your instinct was right, because when we all watched the game, I've seen enough of Halliburton in this case to know like he didn't look right. I've seen enough of athletes to watch say, you know what, he wasn't right. And essentially they pulled him as the game went along. And now we're in this cat and mouse thing where he's just playing just enough to give him the 20 minutes he needs to be qualified as a game played. But it's obviously it has all sorts of implications. One thing, it messes up the chemistry with the team. That's one thing. Second thing is it messes up the head of the athlete. Third thing is now this thing where you're concerned about, in this case, of causing further injury because you're playing him when if you just sat him and rest him, you can't do so. And the reason why I'm saying Halliburton, that dude in this case, if he makes All NBA, might get over up to I guess over 41 million in this case here. In this year, if he makes All NBA. And this is one of these things where, once again, if a guy was able to rest, and the thing is, he's about 2 games away, I think 2 to 3 games away from not qualifying. So my concern with the 65 game limit from day one was it gave no room for the freak accident to happen, the freak incident, because all you need now is, even if he's healthy, all you need now is for a concussion to happen where he gets hit in the nose by somewhere at the temple, and he's got to be out for 2, 3 games or 4 games because of a concussion. And it's a wrap. So they're going to revisit this. I was always more comfortable if they really wanted to push this idea, at least to put it to 60. I felt was a fair enough number that if a guy got hurt and say he missed 10 games, that if something else happened during the season, he had to be out for something else, for like a torn ankle or something like that, it's enough to survive that scenario. But, and one other element I would say, and I'll throw this out to you guys, see what you say about this. The role the media played in all this when it came to MB. All right. Now, I saw LeBron's tweet. I wholeheartedly agreed with his tweet. You all can check it out for yourself. I know a lot of media people right now, for the most part, all got their, because no one's more sensitive about things than media people. They talk a big, tough game on their microphones, but boy, the moment they get challenged or anyone comes at them, they're all with their backs up. So they're all with their backs up. I give credit to a couple of guys who are on NBA radio that actually say they kind of agree with them, because they are playing this little game. It's like, oh, you're not tough enough. You're running from Jokic. The dude kills Jokic every time they play each other. I think the mark is 6-2. He averages like 10 points more than his average, guys. Here, newsflash, guys. Great player, Jokic. He ain't really a defensive stopper. Okay. So this idea, like, oh, geez, he's ducking Jokic. But this type of narrative was running up. I watched the game against last week in Philadelphia and Denver, and they had the signs out in the stadium and all sorts of stuff. And I get the fans are gonna be on doing their thing, but there's got to be a responsibility from some of these talking heads to realize, listen, dude, you know what you're kind of setting up here. So then he comes out and plays in the Bay Area. And I watched some of that game. And he's dragging his leg at points. And so some people describe, he barely even run up the court properly. And you're sitting there going like, the man's like 285 pounds. Like, what are we doing here? Right? And this is, once again, it plays into like, I don't want to be seen as a punk and stuff like that. And it creates this narrative and pressure to play when he had no business playing that game. Everyone talks about, well, it's the Kuminga thing. No, Stephen A. Smith. That's not the point we're getting at. Should have been out there in the first place. Because as we all say, one injury can beget a second injury. And so here it came. Yeah, I even know he's still doing out there with 2 minutes left to go down 12, to be quite honest with you. But hey, that's all there is. It's Nick Nurse, so I'll leave it at that.
I remember a certain guy was injured during our playoff run on the opposite side of the bracket, and they brought him back, and then they had to rest him, and then they brought him back for the finals. That was KD.
Yes, yes, how that worked out, yeah.
And then he got injured again in the finals. Usually your body finds ways to compensate, even if it doesn't present itself as it's healing and getting back healthy. Coach, I want to get your thoughts, and then I'll expand on it, and then we'll move on to Raptors-related stuff.
I feel bad for Halliburton, but this was coming. I say this was coming because of the his contemporaries have kind of made this an issue. It dates back to the Spurs, resting guys, load management, and I think the NBA get a lot of flack over it because of the audience showing up to games and like, oh, we're here to watch the Spurs play, and Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker are sitting tonight, or we're here to watch the Spurs or Raptors play or Clippers play, and Kawhi Leonard sitting again. It's not. I'm not talking about him being injured. Guys play hurt all the time, but you don't want to play injured, of course. Embiid should not have been playing the other night against Golden State, and I don't understand why he did. I really don't know. Like, if they take this to 60 games now, I know it's at 65 games. Does that make it better? Is it 55 games? It's a tough predicament that the NBA is in right now. And beyond, say, like the media has called them out. I've heard Stephen A kind of say things about this, but I think this has just been a growing problem for the last 10 years with this idea of load management. And now it's kind of at its tipping point right now. It's like, well, what now when guys are actually hurt? Or what now if you want to get that max contract? Or what now if you want to make the all NBA first team? It's almost like, too, what might compound this issue is with the new CBA, with the second apron and the Supermax deals. It's almost like, as a fan, you have to cheer against your guy from getting the Supermax because you don't want him to get paid too much, because we either can't re-sign him or we can't go sign other players. And that was the issue that was start back of the season. That's going to be the next issue that comes up. Yep. And why am I cheering against a player because I don't want him to make the NBA first team because I don't want to get the Supermax, because then we get penalized for it? It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Well, I know it's off topic, but I'm saying that's the compounding issue to this.
Right. It all plays into it, though, Coach. To your point, like, it's like, first thing, God bless you, Coach, for stating how this started, because this media has warped this as if players are just lolly-dally skipping around and saying, I don't feel like playing today. I'm going to go get some sun and get some rays. Okay? I'm so glad you went back to where this started from, which is the San Antonio Spurs. Okay? Folks got to realize this, and that's the reason why, going back to Stephen A. Smith, there's an old phrase in this case here, man. Hit dog holler. Okay, so he out here going crazy because he's been running these marching orders for years, as if the players are just like saying willy-nilly, I don't feel like playing today. I don't know any player that says you don't feel like playing today. Well, we know, everyone knows, and he knows, as well as the rest of the media knows. This is management doing this. See, this is the part that drives me crazy with this issue. We have the same people that want to make these rules up with the commissioner. Pretty much in this case here, the ones that are trying to break the rules as fast as they can make them. Right? Like, you're the ones that set this up in the first place with this load management. No player ever thought about, let me go do load management. You guys set this up. We saw CJ McCollum on Stephen A's show explain to him when he was a Blazer. He and Lillard get pulled into the room. They got the old med and science dudes there, plus the GM, whoever else. Got the calendar for the season. X out the games. 4 out of 5 nights? No. Back to back here? No. 2 games or 3 games in 4 nights? No. That's them. And they have to tell them, like, listen, man, this game against whoever, Golden State, we playing this game and fight with them. So this idea that this came from somewhere, like the players just all of a sudden say, no, we're good. We're going to just be chilling, shipping champagne and just go and collect our money. Like, give me a break. Is there an odd dude that might abuse it a bit? Fine. That's human nature. There's an odd dude. I think we all know who those dudes are. But to act like this, like that everyone's doing this every day, like, come on. It's ridiculous.
This is I want to frame this in the right way, because Mel just had a show on this, basically saying the opposite of what we're saying, which is funny.
God bless Mel, man, but sorry, man, you're barking up the wrong tree, Mel. You're barking up the wrong tree, man.
Yeah. Before I get into that, though, I think I'm going to take half a step back and focus on medicine in general, and where medicine is going, and sometimes where it has to shift and learn. A lot of medicine, in terms of the actual drugs and pharmaceuticals that we take to get better, or even just the approach to medicine, is focused on longevity. The problem with longevity is that it misses out on the importance of quality. So if you are, I'll just not gonna even name a. Just say let's say you're sick and you're croaking, and you could add 5 extra years versus 2 extra really good years where you're walking, talking with your family and stuff like that instead of holding on. A lot of people might actually take the 2 extra years where you can be yourself. And I think that that's kind of where it's a much longer exploration that I need to do, but I think that that has informed a lot of how we approach sports sciences specifically. I think we focus on longevity. So, for example, sorry, mouth, but you have people out here that are suggesting exactly what Beyond is saying, that the players don't care, they just want to get paid. That's all that they're about. And compared to the 80s, that's all that they're about. Now, first of all, from a product standpoint, if you're going to compare it to other sports like the NFL and stuff like that, I'm not, even if the players were doing that, I don't mind it. You can't treat people like crap and then expect them to, so there's that side of things. I don't even want to go down that side of things, but I'm just saying, like, there's some people that were suggesting and have been suggesting that, they make too much guaranteed money. I've been saying this from time. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you have the leverage to negotiate in all walks of life. It's not always fair. It's not always right, but it is what it is. So from that standpoint, I'm just gonna keep it right there. In terms of like, well, why, they were built different then. Possibly, but they also did different exercises. They, as kids, because part of it is we at one point raised the age, then lowered back down the age. So one of the things that I would be curious is, as they've raised and lowered the age, and as with the increase in AAU and the amount of time that these kids are spending playing, not practicing, but playing full speed on their body, is probably more than a lot of other professional sports. If I compare it to hockey, and I know hockey is a more, physical sport in terms of hits and stuff like that, but these kids come into hockey at a professional level where they're playing a more professional schedule that makes more sense to their body with practices and breaks and all that kind of stuff at an earlier point. Because if I'm not mistaken, there's I can't remember the name of it, but it's like the OHL, or, where it's like the minor leagues. And that starts a lot earlier. Yeah. So that kind of stuff starts earlier. And to me, if that's starting earlier than where it's like, okay, well, we're just trying to get these kids all through the system, teach them all these things. There's more cuts. You have to be faster and do it all at game speed. And then you're doing, in the minor leagues of hockey, I don't hear of kids doing like 5 games a week every week. Maybe for like a tournament weekend, but that's not every weekend.
Sport won't allow it. That's the reason why.
Exactly.
The sport won't allow it. Yeah.
It's the same with football.
Right. But I think people don't perceive basketball that way, and maybe they should start doing so. So here's, to your point, here's a perfect example. There's a culture right now we've had for generations now. You watch America's pastime. We'll sit here and watch the Blue Jays play. All of a sudden, a random Saturday afternoon, Vlad's sitting out today. Or Vlad, in this case, ain't playing first base. Vlad's just going to be a DH. Right? Essentially a rest day in baseball terms. No one's blink an eye about it if he doesn't even play that game. No one blinks an eye about it. At one time, he never had starting pitchers. In this case, he didn't go 5 deep. I remember a time in this case old enough when it used to be 4 deep, and the 5th dude was just a guy who used to come in once a blue moon. And now you have 5 stars as the starting rotation. Mm-hmm. But there's times before that, before 4 games, it wasn't like that. Back in the old days, in this case, it's probably 3 games, right? But over time, you say, you know what? Our pitchers in this case maybe should get better turnaround time and rest, and we get more guys to be starters in this case at that point.
Well, the other thing too is that people, people play longer, but they also don't walk funny after either.
Well, that's a whole other thing, right? Because this idea that people don't seem to get in this case here, and Halliburton's the perfect example of this. Which
like,
is
Jordan and Shaq, and then you see Shaq's foot looks like it's throwing up some sort of gang sign, and that's just because his foot's jacked up.
Jacked up, he's Kenny Smith. God help him.
Yeah, I saw with his legs are like this, like pigeon foot, and he's like walking around.
Right. People don't seem to realize the punishment that these guys take, especially as guys of that.
He just got like the 5th surgery in the past couple years.
Like, it's crazy. Now, thank God medicine and science is better now. We got better understanding that guys aren't walking around like that. But at the same time, do we want people to be looking at that? No. And the second thing is, what's
Got to
happening now
toughen
with some
up,
of the
man.
guys? Well,
It's
here's
a
the thing: no one's
pushing a
considering.
wheelchair.
It's the
Jeez.
pace of play.
Yeah.
I asked it to you guys one time offline. At some point, do we have to look at ourselves and say, you know what? And this could go back to the Stan Van Gundy point you put on Twitter, where actually Durant actually agreed with him, where he thought Durant was coming after him. It's like, you guys have all this sports science, all these analytics, and yet guys seem to be getting hurt more than ever before. So the question I have to ask is, between the AAU stuff and all this stuff where you're running guys every day, and then in this case, the pace of play, you think it's a coincidence right now watching Indiana half their starting lineups out at the pace
No.
they play at?
No,
You
it's
think that's a
not.
coincidence? I don't think it's a coincidence. I sat there and watched him play the Knicks the other night. No McConnell, no Halliburton half pace, no Turner, no Matherin. Who else I was forgetting that night? There's one more I forget, and that was that night missing. I'm sitting there going, I was like four dudes right there. And only Nemhard just got back. And you have to ask yourself, like, well, maybe something else you might want to look into. Maybe we could push.
You know what I said about Kuminga? I said, don't be surprised if Kuminga has a long career because he didn't do the AAU circuit like how the other guys did.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just something to consider that I keep saying. It's like, we might have gone too far, how far we could push this.
Scotty, even last year, for example, he's been relatively healthy this year, but Scotty last year came in, I mean, even this year, you see the tape and stuff like that on his elbows for things like arthritis and whatnot. Like, part of it is like the punishment that these kids, before they've even gotten into the league, have put on their body is more these days. It is more. And then if anyone's going to bring up Jordan, I'm just going to keep saying it. Look, I'm not saying anything about it as a diss to Jordan, okay? People know I think that Jordan is literally the greatest of all time. But Jordan took time off. And yes, he took time off because he was, yeah, that's true, twice. But he did take time off for, personal reasons. He still took time off. So if he didn't take time off, there's an alternative, timeline where I don't know if how healthy that team is.
Right.
I don't.
Do you get the second three-peat? Right.
You don't. You might not. Now, three-peats in general is tough, but it's tough on your body in general to play that deep.
Yeah. But if you got your key guy getting almost an entire season to rest without getting any sort of taxes on him, here's the perfect example. On the same team, by the time they got to the last one, Pippen pretty much was on one leg.
Well,
Pippen didn't take a break.
Yeah, exactly.
Pippen didn't take a break. Right? So that's my point. Played the same amount of time as Jordan, pretty much. He was a guy who's fairly healthy. Didn't get a break. Between his back and his leg, he was like pretty much walking on one leg by the time he got the last championship season. That's what happens, folks. But,
Coach?
Yeah,
before we go to Raptors stuff, I guess. I mean, we could talk about this forever.
You have to play AAU to get exposure, get notoriety. But there's a toll to that. There's a flip side. If you get hurt, how many games you're playing, kind of nutrition program you're on, what kind of strength training program you're on. Now, mind you, you're 15, 16 years old. You're still developing, you're still growing. And then you hit the flip side where you don't play AAU. You don't get the exposure more often than not. You're like a Siakam. You're a diamond in the rough, quite frankly. And now with Kuminga got the G League experience, which was good for his draft stock at the time. So it's kind of a flip side. Like, you got to play AAU to get the exposure and notoriety, but if you don't, your body may hold up more, but your route to the NBA might be a bit longer or different in general as compared to some of the higher end talents that play AAU. It's interesting because I've worked with some youth and I know some coaches who have taken like 10 to 12-year-olds and have done studies. Let's just see how this works until they're 18. Love of the game, nutrition, all that stuff. Because sometimes the love of the game wears out too. If you're going full out for 5-6 years as a 12-year-old till you're like 18, things change, people change, stuff like that. So it's interesting. I'll just say that. And all the technology, all the medicine that we have today to look at these things, still have tons of injuries. And Beyond mentioned a good point with baseball. Pitching, it's the most conservative it has ever been. There's no guys throwing 9 innings anymore. Good luck.
right?
And everyone's still getting Tommy John surgery.
Exactly, right?
Blowing their labrums.
At a higher rate.
Right. Strasburg's been injured how many times? Like, I lost track how many times that dude's been injured. I think he's barely hit 30 yet. Right? That's my
Otani's
point.
on his second Tommy John surgery.
There you go. And one other sport I'll throw into the mix, because the coach kind of alluded to what they're doing, which is very similar. Tennis. Notoriously talk about exploiting young athletes. Tennis is like the poster child for it. And even tennis say, you know what? Maybe we want to say, like, if you're like 15 or 16, you can only play X amount of events for the year. Now, even they were debating that because I think when Coco started coming up, Coco Gauff in this case here, she was doing quite well, but because of the rule that was in place, it kept her a certain limit from a ranking standpoint because she couldn't play many more tournaments. But that was a protective measure because, especially young women, they were getting burned out by 22, be it mentally or physically, and they're out there, they're out the sport. So these things in this case here, like Andreescu right now, I lost track. I see Andreescu be sitting down on the couch just as much as I am half the time. Like she said, I lost track of the U.S. Open. She barely played more than probably about 2 months worth of tennis. But anyways, it's a fascinating topic. I'm sure we know there's plenty of people are researching this all across the world to figure out what to do about it, because it's a rash that's happening across. It's playing in every sport.
We will definitely have the topic come up again. It was actually on our Commissioner for a Day episode, which has yet to be released. Perhaps if the comments down below ask for it to be released this week, perhaps I will release it on Wednesday.
That episode would be like the Wu-Tang album never got released to Homeboy bought it for like $10 million. I could be like that, man. So, I was gonna just buy the MP.
It was a good episode. I mean, it's been edited, everything is ready to go. So, yeah. And the other thing I'll say is I don't blame the players. Yes, the players did sign up for a bad deal, but I can't blame individual players like say, oh, well, LeBron, you agreed to it. You're part of a union, right? Mm-hmm. It's the union. Really, you should be blaming your union rep. So I can't remember who was the union rep this year. CJ McCollum was one of them. But you have to look at it it's a collective bargaining agreement. It says it in the words. So I can't blame any individual stars, unless I know that they were the loudest voice. I don't necessarily think that LeBron was the loudest voice for this. What I will say, as I allude to my own part within that episode, and again, people link, give me your thoughts if you want it to be released, but I do talk about potential ways to solve this issue, even if I wasn't directly talking about injuries. With that being said, do you guys want to spend time on this episode of Basketball Rewind and talk about the Raptors for a short little itty bitty time, or do you want to save it for?
What the heck? Let's just grind out 5-10 minutes and be done with it.
Okay, so I wrote down just the one topic. I told you guys we talked about it. Okay. We have the offensive process of Darko. Okay. Do we have any idea what is going on here? It seems very inconsistent. I think the other thing, we were flying high at some points. If you go back, Kurt Goldberry, he does a 10-game recap all the time, and he posts like this infographic of where teams are, whether they're, on the x-axis is the offensive end and efficiency, y-axis is the defensive end. We were trending positively on the defensive end. We've never been on the offensive end. Defensively, we've been bad all season. But at least we were, in the correct quadrant. We no longer are after the past 10 games. Now, there's an obvious reason for part of that. But the other more interesting thing is Darko's offense, because we've never consistently been a positive offensive team throughout large portions of the season, and the one consistent thing in that is the person dictating what goes on the court, which would be Darko. Any thoughts?
I'll let the coach speak about this as this is right up his alley.
Well, To me, the offense actually, for the most part, has looked okay since Christmas. It's looked a lot better than it was first of the season when we were historically really, really bad. And I see our 3-point percentage. I think we're 21st now. We were 30th for a long time. Now we're at about 36%, and seems to be getting a bit better. But I'm just going to say this in a general sense. This is to be expected, what's going on right now. I'm not sure what people were thinking when we traded your best player from the last 4 years and your best defender of the last 4 to 5 years and expect that we would somehow get better. There's going to be a lot of pain that's coming from this. They've really, and I've told you guys this offline a little bit, they've really sped up Scotty's development, more or less. And what I mean by that is he is the number one option. He's the number one option on other teams' scouting reports now. And ever since then, we've seen kind of he's been struggling a bit more. Even though in the last 5 games, I think he's averaging about 23, 6 and 6, almost 2 blocks. So statistically, it looks pretty good. But there has been one big drop off, and that's 3-point shooting. He was 38 to 40% most of the year with Siakam. Ever since Siakam's been gone and OG, that has fallen off dramatically because he is now the number one option. And they're trying to see what exactly he is because they've said in press conferences, well, we don't really know what he is yet. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing, like it's year 3 and you're now the number one option. We don't know what you are. And it's a good thing in terms of maybe like how much higher can he get? How much better can he get if we do put him in the right position and surround him with the right people? But what I'm seeing now from this team, to me, this is to be expected. This is what a rebuild looks like. And I hear a lot of people are upset and there's no fight. There will be games where this team will look really good. We saw it against Chicago. We saw it against Miami after the Siakam trade. And there will be too many nights where this team looks really bad. And trying to figure out, I have no idea what Bruce Brown is doing most every game out there. Just look at a bunch of random things on offense. So what I'm trying to say is there are going to be nights where it looks like they don't have a clue what they're doing. They don't know who to get the ball to, what to run. And there's going to be some nights where actually it looks pretty good. It's going to be a game to game thing. This is what happens in a rebuild.
Well, I think I refer to this as the Lord of the Flies phase of the Raptors. Right
now, a little bit.
Yeah, every man's for themselves. Everyone thinks they're going to be the king of the castle.
In the Houston game, we saw them fighting over the conch.
Exactly.
Literally dragging the conch shell.
It does not help that you are 4 days away from a trade deadline. I'm curious to see what this looks like after. Sorry, go on, Beyond.
No, you hit it on the head because that's part of the equation, right? Because like everyone's playing for a different agenda. Some guys are playing to be the man of the team. Other guys in this case are playing for the next contract.
Other guys are trying to play to escape.
Exactly, escape the island, right? So when you all got different agendas, some guys are playing to get more playing time, which is the old school way. How quaint that is! There's different agendas for everybody. So I don't know why are we surprised about this when this was going to happen. I mentioned to you guys offline that the moment you trade Siakam, this is going to untether everything because at least with Siakam, he forced a pecking order to happen, which goes back to the original point Kenyon asking. There is no philosophy as far as now what do we do on offense, what happens. Who are we looking primary to deal with at first? And to make things worse now is the guy I think at the moment, not saying it's right or wrong, but just based on watching for the last 2-3 weeks, the most dynamic scorer they have right now is hurt. Because Barrett is the best scorer on this team at this point. So that don't help either. Because he's the one guy I feel like, okay, give the ball to him, he can make something out of nothing. I don't think there's anyone else on this team I feel good enough to say, you know what, I put the ball in. Even Quickly, who has shown fits and spurts of things, but not really consistently where I feel like, get the ball to Quick with 5 seconds up in the shot clock and something's going to happen. Positive. I don't think so. I don't think he's proven enough at this point that's going to be the case. That's going to have to be part of his development very quickly, mind the pun. But like, we can't have that next year. Like, when we come to the next year, we can't have being looking like this. But to me, Barrett's the one guy. It looks like he's like, okay, he'll make something happen if he has the ball. I'm not saying it's gonna be great all the time, but I feel he can get a shot and he can score fairly consistently if you got to give him 6 seconds left in the shot clock. I don't know what the devil most of these guys are doing with 6 seconds or 7 seconds are left in the shot clock. It isn't pretty. So I mean, it goes back. All roads always lead back to Scotty when it's all said and done. Right now in this phase of the Raptors history, and we'll find out. This is the point we've discussed, and I brought this up from year 1 to year 2, now to year 3. The big old question mark, because my father would say the sickle over Scotty's head. What is he, right? I mean, I've been trying to figure this out pretty much for the longest time, and I don't know. I think based on the Nick Nurse philosophy, which is pretty much, hey man, we're just gonna let you paint and just do whatever you have to do, man. It's groovy, man. Just feel the game and just do what you have to do, man. We'll work it out. That's all fine and dandy for some guys. That ain't great for other guys. Some guys need to be a little more, need to get on the reins of things a little bit more. I think Scotty's one of them dudes you got to get on that a little bit more. But unfortunately, the habit has been built now because the 2 years prior, that it's going to be hard to rein that back in at this point.
Yeah, I think development I have a different developmental philosophy than a lot of newer Raptors fans. I think that you have to build skills one by one. Ironically, our coach talked about that earlier in the season. We have an episode on that. And, you have to, start with one skill, then the next skill, then the next skill. I think we have guys doing a bit too much, whether it be Scotty, whether it be Quickly. And yes, part of that does have to do with the guy that just went out. And for those of you who are sick of us talking about that, I'm sorry, but he just left, and it's not really about him. I'm talking about the current team that we have and why it is that way. So you do have to give some context. When you have a player and then you start them out early, you give them little by little. As they excel, you give them more. You don't suddenly say, oh, okay, well, here's a full plate, or a bunch, it's the old cartoons where someone finishes the work, then they add some more to the thing. All of a sudden, there's like a huge chunk of papers that got put on their desk. It's kind of like that. What frustrates me is that then I see people asking, can we get Scotty some help? He just had help. We just shipped it out. I almost want to tell those people that they might need to get something checked. Because this is literally what you wanted, right? So I don't have an issue with it, right? Yeah, Coach?
Well, some revisionist history, too. We were actually in a very similar position basically 20 years ago.
Oh, man, we're going way back.
We're going back. Vince Carter, Jalen Rose, Chris Bosh. Vince got shipped out first. Bye-bye. Jalen Rose got shipped out
next. Not for good stuff.
Bye-bye. And then they said, we got this kid, Chris Bosh. We're going to see what we got with him. And then that's when Brian Colangelo came in, said, let's try to put some decent pieces around. So they brought in some vets, guys who just knew how to play at that time. Anthony Parker, Brasho, Nesterovic, Garbajosa.
Oh, so we did get a new GM in the middle of that.
In the middle of it, yeah, we kind of did. And for that year, that's pretty good.
I'll decline to comment on that one.
It's funny how history can sometimes repeat itself.
It does seem to repeat itself.
We are literally almost identical to that spot where we're at right now. Scotty is now Chris Bosh. Now, they did not build around Bosh very well. Are they going to do the same? They didn't build around Siakam very well.
As I remember, too, history would dictate that the GM had trouble moving off a guy named Bargnani as well. So we'll see what happens in the future moving forward. But with that being said, this is Basketball Rewind. We've just covered a whole bunch of NBA. We've just covered a whole bunch of Raptors stuff. So give it a like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you on the next show. If you like this stuff, let us know. If you want us to, to hear that episode that I keep referring to, let us know down below. Take care and peace.